Good afternoon. It's Ashley and Justin from CourtReserve. Thank you so much for joining us for one of our summer learning webinars. Today is all about financial reporting.
Yes, so we're going to be covering financial reporting today. Really excited to be doing this webinar with you guys. I know we get a lot of questions around what are the best ways to run reports in CourtReserve? So really happy to be going over this with everyone. So just a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. Today, we're going to spend a fair amount of time going through the really big financial summary reports in CourtReserve. So things like our sales summary, our transaction list, our payment summary, talking about what reports are best for what use cases, what are some of the best practices when running these reports. And then towards the end of the webinar, we're also going to be hitting just kind of a few bonus topics like how to set up revenue categories, taxes, sales taxes, age fee reports, how to double check online payments against your integrated payment provider if you have one. So some of those towards the end as well. I know with financial reporting, just before we get started, I'll say we are going to have kind of a break for Q&A. For more specific questions, we're going to go ahead and put those in the Q&A channel. And if they are more specific, we can grab those and then respond directly to you this afternoon out of the webinar if they are ones that might require a little bit more research to get in and really give you a very specific answer to what's going on. But please, if you've got general questions as we're going through, put those in the Q&A channel and we'd be happy to answer them. All right, so to get started with financial reporting, the place I always like to start is to go to transactions and look at our sales summary report. If there's one report that I would say it would be really helpful to master in CourtReserve, the sales summary is a really great candidate. It's a very powerful, robust report that can do a lot of different things. And understanding how it works is really going to set you up for success to understand all of the other reports as well. So let's take a look at it. So the sales summary report is a report that's specifically going to look at fees in CourtReserve. So I covered this a little bit in our last financial webinar, but the types of transactions in CourtReserve would be either fees, payments, or refunds. So the sales summary really is primarily concerned with fees, although it can factor in refunds as well. The most important thing to understand when you're running the sales summary and any of the other reports in CourtReserve for that matter is the dates that you're filtering on and understanding the difference between each of the date filters you might see. The sales summary is a great example to start with because it has all three different date filters that you might encounter as you're going through CourtReserve. So by default, if you've never run the sales summary before, you're probably going to see something like this when you pull it up. You're probably going to see the fee date set to today. The reservation date is going to be blank, and then it's just going to say fee status all. So if I run this report right now, what it's going to show me is all of the fees that were posted today. And that's an important thing to understand is it's not looking primarily at the actual services that were rendered on today if I'm filtering by fee date, and it's not looking at payments that came in at all if I'm looking by fee date. So if someone signed up for a clinic today, it would show up under this fee date right here. But if the actual clinic happened today, but someone signed up a week ago, it's not going to show up today if I'm filtering by the fee date. So the fee date is looking at when was the fee first originally posted to the account. So let's say that we were trying to run an end of month report. If I run it by the fee date, I might not get what I'm expecting to get on my revenue. So we'll see how this is different. So this is saying that during last month, I had $375 worth of fees posted to the account. By contrast, I could run the report on reservation date instead. So I'll run it by reservation date and I will clear the fee date filters. If I run this report now, I'm going to get a lot more. I get over $1,000. So you can see the totals can be drastically different depending on which dates I'm filtering by. Why is this one different? It's because this is actually looking at when the events or services happened. So this is looking at, okay, how much revenue did we actually do for the camps, lessons, all of those different services that actually happened during last month. What was my revenue for that? And it's, $1,400, a little more than that. So those are two differences between the reports. Now, one thing to note about reservation date, for things that don't have a reservation date, like maybe membership dues or point of sale charges, the system will just use the fee date in place of the reservation date. So you're never going to, quote unquote, miss revenue filtering just by reservation date because something doesn't have a reservation date. The system will just bring the whatever date it was posted to the system. Let's say I sold a whole bunch of beverages and snacks through my pro shop during this month. They're still going to show up if I'm just filtering by reservation date as well. So that's the reservation date. The third set of dates that I might be filtering by, if I hit paid under fee status, and I have to hit paid under fee status for this to show up, is I can filter by the payment date the last month. So let's run this one more time. We'll clear the reservation date. And we'll run just our payments that actually came through last month as a summary. And for that, I get $186 here. So again, very different total than the first two that I ran. So let's talk a little bit about this. Number one, you'll notice that I'm always clearing the other dates. I'm only ever really using one set of dates at a time on this report. That's really going to be best practice for all of you in 99% of the cases. There's very, very rarely going to be a time where I need to combine multiple of these filters unless I'm really hunting for a specific transaction in the system, which you're rarely going to use the sales summary for. So my advice would be think about what exactly am I running this report for and what set of dates do I want to use, and then use just that one set of date filters. So for people who run their end of month reporting on a cash basis, meaning I just want to know what my cash flow into the system was for last month, that's usually going to be a payment date. I'm going to say, just show me my paid fees and based on the actual payment that came in. So let's say that someone signed up for a clinic in May, but they didn't pay until last month in July, and I want to see that revenue on my books in July. I use the payment date. For people that run accrual basis, meaning I want to see my revenue kind of as it's generated instead, I would say fee status equals all, and usually people are going to use the reservation date for that. I know of one or two people who run it by the fee date, but I think the vast majority of people for an accrual basis are going to use the reservation date. Whichever way you decide to run this, this is a great report to export to QuickBooks as well if you use QuickBooks for your accounting, because these reports can be exported to Excel and then imported to QuickBooks. So on the output type of this report, I've got 3 different options for how I can set up the output for a sales summary. I've got the summary, which is what we've been looking at. Detail is going to give me a line-by-line output of every single fee on the date range that I'm looking at and under the categories that I'm looking at. And then revenue categories, if you've set them up, and we'll cover that later in the webinar. If I set them up, that's going to be my third output type. So just to give you an idea of what a detail report might look like, let's run this. And you can see now, instead of filtering down by just categories, it's actually giving me a line-by-line report of every single fee. So a few other just filters to be aware of on this report. Obviously, I can filter by the revenue categories up front. I can filter by reservation types, clinic categories, which instructors. So if you're looking at instructor revenue, and the way that you pay your instructors is based on how much a percentage of the revenue that they actually brought in, you could do that here. You could say, okay, I want to see how much Ashley Owens brought in for the month of July, and then run payroll based on that. So that's very helpful. And then very important down here is these refunds. Typically, if you're running an end of month report, you're going to include the refunds in this report, and then the system is automatically going to subtract out the refunds from your total cash flow. So In this case, if I scroll down, I can see that there weren't any refunds for this month. Let's see if I do current year here in this test account and hit only refunds if we can find some. Here we go. So the refunds will show up with a white cell fill instead of the gray cell fill for a fee. So that's how you can tell. And the amount will be negative in the sums as well. So it's subtracting that amount out from your fee revenue. Okay, so once I've run this report in detail, I've got the option to export to Excel over here, as I said. You've also got some really powerful filtering options even after you've run the report, just with this output that can be very helpful. So one thing that I think a lot of people don't know about, which is a really cool ability here, is the ability to group my outputs by just dragging the header into these columns. So for example, if I wanted to group all of my different fees by the instructors, I could click the instructor column, drag it into the header, and now the report is actually going to allow me to expand and minimize all of the different instructor revenues here by that. And I can do that by instructor. I can do it by any of the different columns. I can do it by date. I can do it by category. So this is a really cool feature. And I mean, I can even get very fancy with it, and I can subgroup twice. So I can subgroup by instructor and then by the category that they taught, for example, and then get the subtotals for each of those. This is very cool. And if I were to now hit export to Excel after doing this, Excel would bring in that formatting as well. So very powerful stuff. For people who really use these reports a lot, sometimes it's just a very helpful visual aid there to know that you can do that. On top of that, you can also just kind of do your more standard filtering where you could, click on this and say, does it contain or is equal to something like adult clinics, if I wanted just to filter down the output like that, because I wanted to see a specific member, let's say. That's there as well. So that's the sales summary report in a nutshell. There's a lot of different options here, right? I can filter down by the payment types that I want to see. So I can even look at just what was my credit card revenue for this year, less refunds, or go through the different payment types like that. I can show the taxes on this report as well. So lots of different options here, very robust report. And probably the most important thing, again, to understand about this report going forward is being aware of the dates in the system and being very intentional with what dates you want to use when running reports inside of CourtReserve. So sales summary, in general, when would you use this report? You're going to use it for a lot of different things, but it's a great end of the month report. In conjunction with maybe one or two other reports in CourtReserve. It's very good at doing that, at getting a very large overview of all of your finances for a long period of time. So would recommend it for that. Let's talk about two or three other of the really big reports in CourtReserve now and what the distinction is between the sales summary and them. So another very commonly used report is going to be the payment summary report. So payment summary is a little bit simplified compared to the sales summary. There's a few less knobs to turn, so to speak. The main difference between the payment summary and the sales summary is looking at fees in the system. So sales summary has the ability to say, hey, show me all of the fees that are on this account, regardless of whether they're paid or not, if you want to run it that way. So you can run accrual basis based off of the sales summary. Payment summary is not going to give you that option. Payment summary just cares about the actual payments made in the system. Now, if I run a payment summary and I run it for end of month and I don't put any other filters on it, except maybe I want to include, refunds in it, I'm going to get a breakdown of all of my different payment types here. So it's very good at breaking down all of my different payment types at the end of the month. And I can compare the amounts that I'm getting here, what my total is here, let's say 186.53, to what I would get on the sales summary if I ran it based on cash basis, meaning just the paid fees and the payment date. If I do this for last month, I should be able to get these to tie out at the end of the month. Yeah, and they do. So Payment summary is great to check against the sales summary. Reasons why you might see a different total here on the payment summary versus the sales summary. The main reason that I see when I'm working with people is that they didn't choose fee status paid and filter by payment date. They tried to do some other filtering of dates combination. And in that case, they might not tie out, because you might have, if I filtered by reservation date instead, there might be some reservations that didn't get paid until the next month, or were already paid in advance before the clinic happened. And so there might be some discrepancies there. But if I filter paid and payment date, I should be able to get that to tie out with my sales summary. So that's, or with the payment summary, excuse me. So, and again, I can export this to a couple of different formats, Excel being one of them, so I can keep track of that. Very useful report, pretty simple to run. I need a date range. I choose which refunds I want to see. I can choose system users here as well. That's kind of interesting, as I can look at which system users were responsible for logging which payments. So that's in there as well. And of course, I can filter down by payment types on the payment summary. So another report that you're going to see that's going to be very similar to the payment summary, but has one or two really important distinctions, is the EOD report, or end of day report. So you can see when I click on this, even just visually, very similar to the payment summary. End of day report is also going to be something where I'm looking at cash flow, I'm looking at payment types. Here's the difference between an end of day report and a payment summary. A payment summary only logs the cash flow once it turns into a payment on a fee. End of day report will log the cash flow as soon as it comes into the system. For most of the transactions you're going to take, those are equivalent. Those will be the same thing. So if a player signs up for an event and then, swipes a credit card online through the portal, just puts in their payment profile, the card gets charged for the event, both the end of day report and the payment summary are going to pick that up as there was a credit card charge today. The case where the end of day report won't match the sales summary, or the payment summary, excuse me, or the sales summary for that matter too, is going to be if someone preloads a balance onto their account. The end of day report is going to pick it up immediately, whereas the other reports like payment summary, sales summary, they're going to wait until that cash is actually applied to something, till it knows where the revenue went. So let's do an example here. So right now we don't have any revenue coming in for today, which is great. So let's say that I come to the club and I want to hand the admin a check for $500 and load it as a balance on my account. You as the admin might go to the billing and use our new preload balance button. So I hit preload balance. It's going to give me a big kind of infographic up here that says this isn't a refund. You're putting money onto this person's account. And I say, great. Yep, they've got a check. They wrote it for $500. And they're loading a balance onto their account. So once that processes, now I've got a $600 balance because there was $100 on there before. If I go back to my transactions report and I look at my end of day report, I'm going to see there's a $500 check on here for today. I took the cash payment into the system today. It's showing up on my end of day report. If I go to the payment summary right now, though, I'm not going to see that $500 in checks. Well, this is looking at last month. Let's look at today. I'm not going to see that $500 check. Why am I not seeing on this? Because it's not a payment yet. It hasn't really paid for any service in the system. It's just come into the system, but it hasn't been applied yet. So if you're ever comparing the two reports, be aware of that distinction. That's really the only case where you're going to see a major distinction between the end of day report and any of the other reports, but it's a helpful one to know for sure. All right, another one that is a really nice just visual report, maybe more than the other reports, is the daily revenue report. I get some questions around this report from time to time. It tends to be more of a supplemental report in my opinion. I don't think it's quite as robust as something like the sales summary or payment summary. So if you're running like your end of month, end of year reporting, I would point you more towards the sales summary, payment summary reports rather than the daily revenue report. But it's a nice visualization, so I'll talk about it just a little bit. Really, it's just a visualization of some of the sales summary report and some of the payment summary report. The main thing to note here, the payment summary is exactly what you would think it would be. It was, what did my payment summary say that we did on this day? And then the sales report is specifically the sales summary, just looking at fee date. So if you're looking at this, you're going to see big spikes if you're a organization that has signups for like your summer or fall sessions on a given day. Those are where you're going to see your spikes on this report. If you're looking at the sales report here, it's going to log when did people sign up for this, not exactly when did they pay for it. So just be aware that that's what you're looking at here. Again, as with almost all of our reports, you're going to see the option to export to Excel. But if you need to filter it down a little bit more, you can always go to the sales summary or payment summary and do that. But very useful report. I can click on the individual dots here to bring up the different dates and see. So I can scroll through it and I can select, what month I want to look at here as well. And there's even the ability to download or print the image here if you want to do that. So very useful. Okay, last big report in CourtReserve is the transaction list report. So I saved this one until the end because it's kind of the master report, so to speak. I know sales summary is a really big report. It's the one that I'm usually going to go to. But if there's something where I just need maximum customization for a report in CourtReserve, I can always go to the transaction list. The main thing about the transaction list is there's so many different options for what I could even be filtering for, that usually I'm only going to go there whenever I have a very specific query that I need to make in the system, or I need to track down an individual fee in a haystack, so to speak. So looking at the transaction list, I'm going to see it's kind of a hybrid of the sales summary report and payment summary in some ways. I can choose what transaction types I want to look at, unlike the other reports. So I can run it based on fees. I could say fee, membership fee, miscellaneous fee, and I'm kind of in the sales summary territory, or I can run it and see payments instead here and balance credits. I can see refunds. I can do some combination of them. So it's very powerful. I can filter by paid transactions, unpaid transactions, payment types. This is a helpful one if you're trying to find specific point of sale charges specifically. If there was some question that came up about there's a specific charge through point of sale, I'm trying to find it, I will often go to this report because I can filter just by point of sale under the subtype and then really pare down the dates as well. So there's a lot of familiar options here. Be aware that start date, end date here is going to kind of change what you're looking at depending on if you're looking at a fee versus if you're looking at a payment. So if I ran this report based on start and end date of a fee, that's showing when the fee was posted, when the person signed up for something, versus if I do it by payment, then it's essentially showing me the payment date, which those two can be different as we discussed. So just be aware of whatever transaction type you're picking here. A lot of options to filter again down here. So we've got the option to filter by recurring fees specifically. So if you're someone that is looking or using recurring fees in our system, this is a great report that's going to track those specifically by the type of recurring fee as well. So that's nice. One of the most helpful things about the transaction list that really I use it for is in the edge cases where you might have someone who is deleted in the system. The transaction list still remembers all of the transactions that that person had, even if you've deleted them out of the system. So if I run this report, let's just say I'm only showing paid transactions, and let's see if we can pull up some membership fees. Okay, so we don't have membership fees here, but let's say that someone went in and actually deleted Wilma Flintstone out of the system. Or actually, let's use one that this has a payment type of balance. We don't have any credit card ones here, but let's say that Wilma Flintstone got deleted out of the system and that she had paid $40 for a credit card transaction. And now she's come back and wants to know, can we refund her card? You can still find that transaction in the transaction list and actually click on the transaction date of that fee, and you will still get the option to refund her, even though she's no longer in the system. So if you really need to, you can always go back to the transaction list, find those individual fees in the system, and then update them as necessary. Either void them if they're unpaid, refund them if there was a charge that you need to refund. Pick refund destination here, pick the amount, and issue that refund here. So we do not delete the financial data out of the system in CourtReserve. We hold on to all of that. So you can always go back and find that. So very powerful report for that. Last report that I will cover, and then we'll take a pause for just a little bit of Q&A if we have any, is going to be under the online payments report. So online payments is if there ever is a question that comes up about what charge was issued through CourtReserve, was there a double charge for something, was this member charged correctly for something, and then you need to actually get into your payment gateway to do a little bit of research. Online payments is probably going to be a report that you should look at to help understand what's going on. This is going to track exactly what it sounds like, all of your credit cards, and if you take e-check, all of your e-checks that CourtReserve is logging. It's going to have a date and time stamp, who the member was, membership number, what the total for the charge was, and importantly, here's your transaction code that you can take into your payment gateway and search and see, okay, here's the transaction in question. So for example, if you were looking at transactions and for a specific member and they said there was a double charge, you could search their name up here and see, okay, does CourtReserve say that there were actually 2 charges made? And maybe you look here and you see, yeah, there was one for $12.37 and another one for $50 on $12.38. Something might have happened here. Or you can look and say, no, looks like there's just one charge. I'll take this transaction code. I'll go look in my payment gateway, see if anything happened there, but maybe no cause for concern thus far. So very helpful report, just if you get very specific questions about what actually has been charged through the system. All right, so I'll go ahead and take a brief pause there and just check in with Ashley and see if we've got any Q&A that's come in so far that we want to cover.
Nope, you must be doing a great job because we have no Q&A right now. So again, I think we forgot to say to put your questions in the Q&A. That was my fault. So if you guys want to take a moment, put some of those questions in, we'll be glad to answer as much as we can. And Justin can feel free to take a breather and then continue on.
Yeah, I'll give you guys just a few seconds in case you've got anything. And again, we are next little section that I'm going to cover. I know a big one for a lot of people is revenue categories. So we're going to get to that in just a second. And then I'll also briefly just touch on a few other bonus ones like sales tax, age fees, those sorts of things. All right, well, I'm going to jump into the next one. Again, if you do have questions, you can drop them in Q&A. Okay, so let's talk about very briefly just the age fees and sales tax reports here as well. So age fees is a report that you can run that's going to track old unpaid fees in the system, basically. There's not a ton to this report. It's a nice report. You've got a couple of features here, like I can filter by the number of days that a fee has been outstanding, which is nice. This is the only report that you're going to really easily be able to just click that one button and then get that precision. So I can say, hey, just show me the fees that have been outstanding longer than 3 months. Here's the name of my accounts with that, and here's how much has actually been outstanding for that amount. So we've got some outstanding fees here. Maybe we want to crack down on that from our members' perspective. And then probably the most important checkbox on this report, just to know what's going on, is, am I excluding upcoming reservations and clinics from this report? So if someone signed up with the lesson hasn't happened yet. Do I want to count that as an aged fee or not? A lot of people wouldn't. So a lot of people would check this box, but completely up to you. Okay, I do see that we've got a quick question that came in here from Katie, so I'm going to look at that. So her question is, downloading the revenue report for the past several days after the month ends, I do put end date for fee date and the month's reservation date. Is that messing up my numbers? It might be, depending on how you're running the sales summary report. So let's double back to this because this is a great question. I really like this question. So I'm going to go back to the sales summary here for a second. So if I'm understanding the question right, it's, hey, if I filter in this payment date from this date to this date for the current or for last month, I'm running an end of month report. If I put in an end date here as well, is that messing me up? I'm going to say in this specific case, if you're looking at just the end dates, okay, no payment date. Cater, could you tell me exactly what dates you are putting in? Are you putting in just the reservation dates and then fee dates like this? Because it will depend here. I usually want to avoid doing something like this, where I've got a full set of multiple dates that I'm putting in. And I'll tell you why. So let's look at an example where I'm not looking at fee status paid. I'm just looking at reservation date and fee date. Here's the way this report, reservation date and end fee dates. Yeah, okay. So something like this. The way the sales summary report is going to combine these filters is it's going to use an and condition, meaning I'm going to show you only the fees that match this filter and this filter. So the more filters that I stick on it, the narrower, the more restricted the report is getting. So I probably will, if I'm doing enough transactions, I probably will get a lower total from running both of these filters like this versus if I just run one filter. So if I run just this reservation date, let's see what we get on the total. I get the 1,400. Now let me put in this fee date as well and run both of them. I get only 374, dramatically different. So why is that happening? It's happening because if I run both of these together, I am missing the case where someone signed up before this date. So if I leave, okay, and if I leave the fee date from blank, I think I've solved my problem here. So if I put just fee date 2 in here, I probably won't get an error in my totals because there's no way that someone could sign up after an event ends. Although I guess you could do that. Actually, that's a good point. If I sign someone up for the event after the event ends, I might miss it in this case. If the sign up date when the fee gets posted to the account is this month, but the event happened last month, I could miss them in this case. So that's probably a lot less common than if you had the fee date from in here and we're filtering both of them. You could miss a lot of revenue doing that. But just for the sake of the argument, I would say best practice would be if you're running based on reservation date, or if you're running based on paid date, just run it based on those dates. Don't include this here. Otherwise, you're not going to catch a few of the transactions in either month's report. And that's really what you want to avoid, right? Is I don't want a situation where I missed it in this month's report and I'm not going to pick it up in next month's reporting either. So hopefully that, I'm so glad that you asked that question. That's a really good clarification. So just be careful with those kinds of reports. Again, I think best practice is always just use one of the filters. Maybe you've got a situation where you use multiple and it doesn't mess you up that much, but better safe than sorry on something like that. So great question. All right, so Very quickly, just going to talk about the sales tax report in the system. So by default, I can put in a fee start and end date here, and then it's going to break down my different revenue categories in the system that I can apply taxes to. So we can see we actually didn't have anything for this month, but if I run it for the current year, it's going to, break it down by category of the sale. What were the exempt sales? What were the taxable sales? Some of the categories of that. And then what was the total tax that I collected, my gross sales, my net sales. I can export it to Excel. Pretty straightforward there. To set up your sales tax, if you're not familiar with that, you can go to the settings. And then if I scroll towards the bottom, there's just going to be under billing settings an option for taxes here. So I can click on this and set up what my different tax rates are going to be. And then for the tax rate option, I can either add the tax to the item price, or the other option is going to be, do I want to include the tax in the item price? So I have both of those options here, and I can select it for each of my individual tax rates. So I could even pick something different for this tax versus this tax. From there, you're just going to see the options to apply those taxes to certain categories kind of sprinkled around the system. So for example, for memberships, I can add a tax to a membership by going to the memberships tab, clicking on the membership that I want to add a tax to, and then looking at the membership price, right? I can put a tax rate in here for membership, for example. On memberships, let's say I charge an initiation fee as well. Now I've got a different revenue category, and I can choose whether or not the initiation fee is taxable as well. So similar things for reservation types, court costs, events, all of those are going to be kind of underneath their individual headings, depending on what you're looking at. So I won't go through all of those, but that's where to find those. So looking at the transactions, we've looked at sales tax, we've looked at age fees. The last thing that I really want to talk about is going to be the revenue categories. So revenue categories are technically optional in the system. You don't have to set up revenue categories to get the system to work. I typically encourage people, if they're doing any kind of real financial reporting through the system, go ahead and set up your revenue categories. And the reason is they're fairly low effort to set up, and they're probably impossible to really mess up really badly. And the reason is they're 100% reversible in the system. So I really try to just tell people, you can't mess revenue categories up, at least not permanently. If you do something, you make a mistake, you can always fix it with revenue categories, which is just really nice. So let's talk about how to set those up. I'm going to go under billing settings, and I can create as many revenue categories as I want, give them whatever name I want. I can give them obviously unique GL codes. I don't want to have the exact same GL code for each of my revenue categories. This GL code is completely arbitrary, so you can make it whatever you want. They're not a correct GL code for any of the categories that you put in. The main thing to know with revenue categories is for each kind of stream of revenue that I have. So, my reservation types, my event categories, my different types of memberships, my different point of sale item categories. Those are kind of my different streams, all the different types within there. They can only go to one revenue category. So one stream goes to one revenue category. I can have multiple streams that all go into one revenue category. Like I've got all of my adult clinics all feeding into this one GL code here, but I can't make one of these streams feed into multiple different revenue categories. And that's just kind of a fundamental accounting thing of, at that point, I should be able, at the end of the month, I should be able to look at my revenue categories and just add them up and get my total revenue. That's really the goal. So if I were able to drop the same stream into multiple revenue categories, I would be double counting my revenue, which wouldn't be correct. So just be aware of that. Like, let's say I come into the, what would be a great example? Like, let's say I come into annual fees, and for some reason I want to put a membership type under here. Like, let's put my tennis individual membership underneath the annual fees. It will automatically appear under annual fees, but it will automatically also disappear from any of my other revenue categories that had that in there beforehand. So it was under membership dues. It automatically disappeared from membership dues to appear under annual fees as well. And if I said, oh, that was a mistake, I need to change it back, I can always just go to this revenue category that it was in and select it again. Save the changes. And now it's gone through my annual fees and it's back in the membership dues. So everything needs just exactly one GL code to sit under whenever you do this. You do not have to apply every single stream of revenue that you have in your system to a GL code. When you do something like run a sales summary report, maybe for the end of the month like this, and you choose revenue categories as the output, if you have some revenue that hasn't been assigned to a category yet, you're going to see it show up just like this as its own unassigned category. So, and I'm looking at this, my total down here, again, should add to whatever the total would be if I was running the summary or the detail report. Should be exactly the same total. I just might have some unassigned. I can click on any of these revenue categories to basically get an expanded view of just that category. So it's going to load up all of my different reports in here and show them to me. Looks like we might be, there we go. So we've got, here's my membership fee, and it's a membership dues initiation fee for this member. So I could click on this member now and say, okay, what did he have? Looks like he had a free trial membership. So I could go back and see, okay, this was actually for a club membership for the initiation fee. I realized that wasn't assigned to a revenue category. And then you could go in and add that to a revenue category. Here's the cool thing about revenue categories is they're 100% dynamic as well. So that means that anytime I update a revenue category to include a new stream of revenue, the system's retroactively going to go back and assign all of the previous revenue before I made that change into that new category as well. So it will retroactively update any of my mistakes that I've made as well. That's why I say you can't mess this up. If you accidentally have something in the wrong revenue category for 2 months, you can always go in and change it now, and it will update it for the prior 2 months as well. So let's do this right now for this club initiation fee. Let's go to our settings. Let's see if we can find this under our memberships here. Is it club membership? So I could go back and I could actually, let's see, let's on a monthly price here. Could go in and I could assign this to a membership dues. And then if I go and I run the revenue categories report again, now anyone who had this fee on their account before, or this bill on their account, it will now get assigned to the correct revenue retroactively. So that's the nice thing about revenue categories. You can always make changes and it'll update any of the mistakes that you've made before. So that's something that I would recommend. I guess one thing to note with that is if you were someone who was like, oh, I wanted my 2021 revenue to be in one category, and then I wanted my 2022 revenue to be in a different category, if that's something that you would want, be aware that just changing the revenue category now won't necessarily give you that, because it's going to update all of the previous year's revenue to the new category as well. So if you do need to do that, what you'll need to do is actually create new reservation types or event categories or memberships for your new year. So you would need to have an event category for 2022, for example, that you could then assign to that new revenue category. I don't know of a lot of people who do that. I don't know that's a common practice, but just something to be aware of as you're looking at this revenue category. That might be the only time where you really need to plan ahead a little bit and take that into consideration, is if you do want to do that. One last thing on here, you'll see eligible for miscellaneous items up here. So one of the things you can do in the system is just post a fee to someone's account as a miscellaneous fee. If you want your revenue category to be an option when you're doing that. So let's say you go into a member's account and they've conveniently loaded up a huge balance for you, and now you need to charge them a fee. You can see the revenue category drop downs as an option for posting this miscellaneous fee. You're only going to see those if you have enabled eligible for miscellaneous items underneath these revenue categories. So I'm seeing there's only 6 options that I have here for issuing that miscellaneous fee underneath a revenue category. That's going to match, not miscellaneous fees. Let's go to the revenue categories. Those are going to be the 6 that had this eligible for miscellaneous items underneath here. So we've got our annual fees, apparel, contract time, etc. Those 6. So if I needed to issue them a miscellaneous fee for a party, let's say, I could go into the parties revenue category, hit eligible for miscellaneous items. And now when I go to post the fee on their account, I should see the parties drop in here, and I do. So now I can pick the revenue category, pick the fee amount, give it a note, and give it a tax rate if I want to. Post the fee. And now my balance was deducted. It was applied to that fee. That fee is now underneath that new revenue category. And just to circle back, now I'm going to see that $500 check that I had. So this will be the last thing we'll talk about, and then we'll address Q&A at the end. Now that balance was applied from the preloaded balance to this miscellaneous fee, circling back to the payment summary earlier, now I've had that $256 in revenue actually applied from the balance. It's now going to show up on my payment summary reports, not just on my end of day reports. So just to show you what I'm talking about there, just a little bit of review. We were looking at the end of day report earlier where we saw that $500 check transaction come in. Now, if I go look at the payment summary for today, I'm going to see that that came in as a balance payment. So note that the payment summary didn't count that payment for the party as a check transaction because the payment itself was a payment from the member's balance. So payment summary says, yep, I'm seeing $256 of balance payments today. The end of day report is saying, I saw $500 cash that was loaded to the member's account. So just a little bit of a distinction example for you there about how those reports will be different as well. All right, so that about wraps it up. Happy to cover if anyone's got any more general questions to go through about anything that we covered today on the reports. Drop those in the Q&A. We've got a few minutes left. If it is a specific question, also you can drop it in or just email our support channel, support@CourtReserve.com, or drop in the live chat this afternoon. Our team would be absolutely happy to help you with any questions that you had while watching today. So I'll just check in with Ashley right now and see if we've got any existing Q&A here at the end.
We don't. Everything looks good. Thank you guys for joining us today.
Awesome. Well, yeah, as Ashley said, so happy that you guys were able to be here today. Hopefully this was helpful. If you do think of any questions later, please let us know. We'd be happy to help out. And I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your Friday.
Yes. Happy Friday. Bye-bye.